Welcome to episode 9 of the Revolution podcast, where I, your host Ryan, sit down with industry experts to discuss the latest trends in e-mobility, clean tech, and the future of transportation. Today I'm joined by Ahmed Samir Elbermbali, a sustainable mobility expert based in the UAE, who's currently part of the Middle East and North Africa Clean Energy Business Council and the World Economic Forum's Global New Mobility Coalition, working on innovative EV charging infrastructure projects for the past 3 years in the UAE and Egypt. Ahmed is currently pursuing his MBA in Sustainable Mobility Management at the Technical University of Berlin. Into the episode we go. Welcome to the podcast, Ahmed. I'd like to start by asking about your background in the industry and where your passion originated.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for having me. I graduated with Bachelor in Aerospace Engineering from a university in Egypt. And during my bachelor, I actually started working on a lot of EV projects, and that's how I got excited and interested in the sector. So during my bachelor, we used to manufacture a lot of like hybrid electric vehicles, solar powered vehicles, even Hyperloop, which was electric as well. And all of these were for university competitions. So starting immediately after my bachelor, I started a startup doing some EV charging solutions, including battery swapping, which eventually didn't work, but it was a very good experience. And that's how I got into the field. With the time, I started to be in the right community. So I started to be part of different projects in the UAE and recently in Egypt as well.
So you're currently working with Catec Mobility. I'd love to hear about your role at Catec Mobility and what you're doing as a company.
Of course. So Catec actually started in 2018. Catec Mobility, it's a subsidiary of Catec LLC.
Yeah.
And what Catec Mobility does is it provides electric vehicle charging solutions to the GCC region. And so it's currently active in the UAE and Jordan. And when I say solutions, EV charging solutions, it's not only the hardware, so we provide hardware, software. We provide also some consultancy and advisory services for customers. And we work mainly with enterprises. We mainly provide the services to enterprises. Recently, we also started to look at individuals as well. So Catec Mobility is currently the official reseller for EV Box and both the UAE and Jordan, and very soon would be for the whole MENA region, excluding Egypt. And we have noticed actually the market has been going very fast for us, and we are very excited about what's coming next for Catec Mobility.
Okay, great. And you're originally from Egypt. Would you say that the country is aiming to promote sustainability and in particular sustainable transportation to younger generations?
Honestly, I think I was lucky because I got into a university which is unique in Egypt. It's called, there's one person who got Nobel Prize in chemistry. He's only our person. His name is Ahmed Samir.
Okay.
And he spent most of his time in the US, and eventually he figured out that he needs to do something for his country. So he went back to Egypt and they started this university.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a research-based university. I think it's the first one in the region and this with this mission and vision.
Okay.
So I was very lucky to be part of this university. We have very unique programs. One of them was the one I was studying. I was actually studying aerospace engineering, as I mentioned, and the focus was mainly about the issues that are facing the society, the Egyptian society and the Arab society.
Mm-hmm.
So one of them was sustainability and the climate change. And that's, I think, it's not the mainstream in Egypt, but I think, as I mentioned, I was lucky to be part of this community and be a student at this university.
Okay, so perhaps there are some opportunities for young people to learn about sustainability in Egypt. So you're currently based in the UAE. How would you assess the current state of EV adoption?
Yeah, I think the UAE market is very interesting. They got a very, very visionary leadership, which has been moving everything from the top down. So you see a leadership that has recently adopted a vision to diversify the economy from oil and gas to sustainability and other renewable energy projects. You see a lot of investment has been made into many renewable energy projects. Like Dubai has the largest solar PV park in the world. And there's too many other projects. Masdar, like one of the most popular projects in the world for sustainability and renewable energy. And recently, the different Emirates have different goals in terms of the electrification plans.
Yeah, this is something I was actually really intrigued about, to see whether the different Emirates have different policies and approaches to EV adoption.
Yeah, that's correct. Which sometimes it's a challenge, but at the same time, sometimes it's also opportunities for the companies. For example, now Dubai is the leader in terms of the EV adoption and the EV incentives for both the manufacturers and the EV owners.
Mm-hmm.
I think we'll speak about this. I can speak about this now.
Yes, sure.
Yeah. So Dubai, they started in 2015. They started something called, so Dubai, they have an entity called DEWA, which is Dubai Electricity and Water Authority. And it's the main organization or authority that's responsible for the EV agenda in terms of the infrastructure, along with RTA, which is Dubai Road and Transport Authority. And
Okay.
RTA is mainly focusing on parking, the toll, anything from once the vehicle is already in the road, and some incentives for the vehicle itself. But DEWA comes from the infrastructure side mainly. So DEWA, they launched something called Dubai EV Charger Initiative. And what they did actually is very interesting. They started it's called the Dubai EV Green Charger Initiative. And what they did is actually they installed more than 240 public charging stations. And they decided, okay, we're going to make the public charging completely for free. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And the main purpose for this is to encourage more people to actually buy EVs, because back then there was no awareness about what's EV, how environmental friendly it is to the world, etc.
Okay.
And most of the people think it's only for the rich people, which sometimes especially in Dubai, when you launch new vehicles and somehow supported by the government, most of the people think it's some sort of luxury.
Yeah.
But they did that, and they kept expanding the period through when the charging is free till now. Actually, it's till end of 2021. And so right now there's more than, I think, 600 public charging stations in Dubai alone, and all of them you can use them completely for free. And by the way, Dubai is the second intense city worldwide in terms of the charging points per electric vehicle.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask about the proportionality of EV charging stations to electric vehicle.
Yeah, so right now there's I think around 2,200 electric vehicles on the road in Dubai alone, versus almost, as I mentioned, almost 580 public charging stations. That's doesn't include the home chargers or the private chargers.
Okay.
And I think if you divide that, that's almost 1/3. Like for every 3 cars, there's one charger available, which makes it, as I mentioned, the second intense city after Amsterdam. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Abu Dhabi is a little bit behind, because Abu Dhabi actually started putting the incentives and regulations only recently. Recently, I think they have launched one of the policies is that for any new building, at least 1% of the parking spaces has to be equipped with a charging station, which is a very good, I think this would be a very good push to the AV infrastructure in Abu Dhabi. So most of the people, when you see UAE, they think it's mainly Dubai, but what people don't know is actually Abu Dhabi alone is 2/3 of the whole area of the UAE.
Okay, so Abu Dhabi and Dubai obviously compose 2 of the 7 Emirates in the UAE. What about the other 5?
I think they are also doing very good steps, especially Ras Al Khaimah. They just launched it, I think, almost 1 week ago.
Okay.
Their energy efficiency strategy.
Okay.
And EVs has a section in this. And I think they are focusing more on the infrastructure within the coming month. So I think Ras Al Khaimah, I think we'll see some good news from Ras Al Khaimah coming out within the next few months, as I mentioned. The other Emirates, they already have some of them. I think like Fujairah, they have some charging stations already in place, but it's mainly through private sector. Like you'll find most of them at the hotels. So these hotels mainly install them as a service for their customers, especially the Tesla owners. But I think from regulation point of view, I think there's still a lot of effort that needs to be done at these other emirates.
So the next thing I wanted to touch on was the country of your origin, Egypt, and what you see as the main differences between the state of EV adoption in Egypt and the UAE.
Absolutely, there's a huge difference. So
Okay.
Egypt, as you know, it's over 100 million, the population, and it's very different. Like if you're in Cairo, the greater Cairo alone, it has over 20 million people live in one city.
Yeah.
Like it's not one city, like the greater Cairo, which is
Mm-hmm.
few cities. And also there's a lot of differences in the cultures between the different segments of people, which makes the implementation of any strategy very, very challenging, of any
Mm-hmm.
policy, etc., very challenging. And also understanding the needs of the different parts is also very challenging. So I think in 2018, the government decided that we want a lot of used electric vehicle models to be available in the market. So they allowed the import of used EVs, especially the European ones, without tax. Yeah,
Okay.
and I think that was the tipping point. So a lot of people started to import a lot of used EVs, but here comes the challenge. Because of the lack of knowledge, awareness, experience, um, some of the stakeholders who used to import these didn't actually do it in the right way. That's my opinion. So they didn't raise the necessary awareness so that they can build the base based on which they can actually start selling these EVs
Mm-hmm.
and build the infrastructure. So they start importing these EVs and just launching some models that I think were not the right models for the market there. So I think till this moment, all of this were in 2018 until today. Um, the I think there's a lot of confusion, misunderstanding from the Egyptian market to EVs. Most of them still think it's a gadget. It's not really a vehicle that can travel
Mm-hmm.
between for a long distance. Just for moving in gated communities. Some people don't actually believe that charging is now can take you up to 40 minutes, 1 hour max. They think you have to charge it for a very, very long time.
Yep.
There's some basic misconceptions still in the Egyptian market. So I think there's a lot of effort that still needs to be done in Egypt. That's a point from awareness point of view. The other point is uh, there are two, or used to be two. I think it's now only one because one of the two companies, I think, almost bankrupted because they had some internal issues. So there are two charging point operators in Egypt who they bought most of the investment and they installed a lot of charging stations, mainly in the gas stations. And now, also because in Egypt you can't sell electricity, so
Okay.
they had to actually find other business models to actually go around this. So most of them were actually providing electricity for free, and they were trying to like provide it based on membership, but it didn't work because the membership was too expensive and people didn't find the whole model. In Egypt also, it's very difficult to convince people to look at the whole life cycle costing.
Yes.
It's not really about the initial investment, it's about how much you would save on the long term. So it's also, it's not the Egyptian culture, so it might be a bit challenging as well. So in conclusion, what I think Egypt needs to do is mainly it should start again from the government to put some efforts and raising awareness about what's EV, and also I think there's still some regulations need to be put in place to facilitate the import of different EV models,
Mm-hmm.
and also for the different companies to invest in the infrastructure. Another point is there's a lot of organizations, government organizations in Egypt who own larger fleets. So that's something UAE has done already,
Okay.
which is to electrify the fleet of the government. That's a very good step. At the same time, to be also fair, Egypt has done some interesting projects in terms of the public transport. So there's now some, I think, 10 electric buses are running in Alexandria. So I
Okay.
think 3 years ago they started the testing phase, and and all of them, I think, are BYD buses. So there's also some good partnerships with some Chinese automakers. So the public electrifying the public transit, I think there's a very good segment as well that needs more focus from the Egyptian government and has a lot of potential.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to learn about Egypt's current state of EVs and what they can do to develop even further. Moving on, some people might see the irony in the fact that the UAE has built much of its wealth on oil resources, yet electric vehicles are almost the polar opposite and perhaps even a threat to this market. What are your opinions on that?
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. But just to also clarify, uh, when you say oil and gas, it's actually mostly coming from Abu Dhabi. Like if you look at the other Emirates, even Dubai doesn't
Okay.
have that much oil. It's Dubai is mainly dependent on the tourism, the
Okay.
port. Dubai has one of the biggest ports in the world, and also the business. Like there's a lot of companies that have their HQ based in Dubai as regional hub
Okay.
or the hub for this region. But it doesn't have that much oil and gas. So if you talk about Abu Dhabi being an oil exporter, I mentioned at the beginning that the whole country, has recently a lot of plans to diversify the economy and focus more on exporting this as much as they can from oil and gas. And uh, uh, like I tell you something, like Dubai, they have a vision that by 2050 they would have 90% of their electricity is coming from renewable resources. And there's some talks that this actually might be earlier than this. Currently, I think the Mohammed bin Rashid Solar Park supply, if I'm not mistaken, almost 8% or 7.5% of the electricity consumption of Dubai. And by 2030, this would go up to 30%. And as I mentioned, by 2040, they want they want this to go up to 80 or 85% of the electricity usage for the whole emirate.
Okay.
And this is a plan that the leadership has put actually in different sectors. It's not only in sustainability and diversifying the economy from oil and gas. It's also on the startup level. There's a lot of support for any company that's working on sustainability topics and all the Emirates, not just Abu Dhabi or Dubai. A lot of investment have been made in different startups working on sustainability, climate change, like energy, water, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a clear vision, and that's how it works in this region. It's much easier if once you have the government support to actually implement and expand the scope on these topics. So I expect that within the coming few years, you'll find this region actually, I think, one of the leaders in sustainability and even electric vehicles.
Okay, so I actually wanted to move on to your education and the MBA you're currently completing. So you're doing that in Berlin, and I was interested in whether you'd actually noticed any big differences between EV adoption and maybe even the kind of perception of EVs in Germany in comparison to the UAE.
So the German market is started much earlier than the UAE, I think.
Yeah.
So there's absolutely, you can expect that there's more EV models available. I'm doing the campus I'm doing my master's at. It's called UF campus. You might be familiar with it.
Yes.
And yeah, and UF campus, because it's actually carbon neutral since 2006, sorry. So 2007, something like this. So I can actually spot more than 11, like sometimes I actually even have like 12, 13 different electric vehicle models parking in the same parking lot. So that gives you an idea about the difference between the two markets. So there's a lot of EV models, which usually this has a huge impact on actually the adoption, because if people have a lot of choices, usually they're more likely to buy one of them, which is one of the challenges also in the UAE. There's no that many choices yet for the customer. Especially this actually interesting point. So the UAE has most of the roads are actually highways. So that's why the culture is more into SUVs. And if you look at the kind of EV models that are currently available in the UAE, most of them are actually sedan vehicles and even small sedan vehicles. And the only one that's SUV so far is the Tesla Model X. And that's why most likely you'll find a lot of Model X in the UAE. In Germany, it's not the case. So you'll find all the different vehicles with, I think, some balanced distribution. The other thing is infrastructure. It's a little bit advanced as well. It's very clear. You'll find many companies and even utilities as well are into this sector already in Germany. So I think also the policies, like there's a lot of advanced incentives that are provided to the end user, to the charging point operators. So, but as I mentioned before, I think within the UAE is actually progressing in many different ways. Every few months, you might find a new policy, a new incentive provided for the end user. So I think we should see. I'm not trying to say it will be like Germany, but I think we'll see very advanced EV market in the UAE and perhaps in the GCC region as well, because Saudi is also catching up with this very soon. Germany, also the interesting point is you find different models. Even the car sharing companies are also electrifying the fleet. You'll find the delivery companies have some of them are electrifying the fleet. So it's getting everywhere as well, because it's a manufacturing company. The company that manufacture has BMW are testing some of their models with Share now, Volkswagen as well. So then the landscape is quite different. The other point is actually the weather. It's very hot, very humid weather. So I think when they tried some testing for the Nissan Leaf, it didn't actually eventually work for this environment. Okay. That's why you will not find Nissan Leaf in the UAE now or anytime soon, as far as I know. So not every EV model is actually suitable for the weather in this part of the world.
So the suggestion here is that the heat is a disadvantage rather than an advantage. But surely with solar power production, the heat and sun are beneficial.
Yeah, solar power in general, yes, as I mentioned, there's so much investment. As you might just Google Mohammed Blashid Solar Park and you will be amazed by how big it is and how advanced the project is. So there's a lot of investment in solar and both Emirates, Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Also Saudi. I think not only even solar, the other renewable energy sources as well. Hydrogen. It's the buzzword now. There's so much investment. Like only 2 days ago, Saudi Arabia they announced that they have a future city called Neom, which is under construction, and they announced $50 billion investment and building the largest facility for hydrogen production in the world. Because actually in this region, it's the cheapest region to produce hydrogen. So yeah, the conclusion is the solar is very cheap in this region. I don't remember the numbers because I'm not really a solar expert, but as far as I know, it's one of the cheapest parts of the world to produce solar energy.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So the next thing I wanted to discuss was the two organizations that you are a member of, the Clean Energy Business Council and the Global New Mobility Coalition. What are these initiatives and what are they trying to achieve?
Absolutely. So Clean Energy Business Council, or CEBC, it's a not-for-profit, non-governmental organization.
Okay.
It's the only in the region that's focusing on clean tech. It started in 2010, and the main purpose is to act as the voice of the private sector to the government and to advocate on specific topics. Right now, it's focusing on 3 different topics. One of them is e-mobility. The second one is energy efficiency. Third is climate finance. But on e-mobility, we started 1.5 years ago, I think almost 2 years ago now, something called Future Mobility Club. And when we started this, it was actually called New Energy Vehicles Club. But the reason why we made it future, because we had some companies who are interested in the other aspects of future mobility, like connectivity, autonomous. So we decided to call it Future Mobility Club. When we started, we had almost 4 companies. And now we have 45 almost companies who are members of this. And what we do at Future Mobility Club, or FMC, is we advocate, as I mentioned. So we meet with the government stakeholders. We try to address the challenges of our members. And we focus on 3 different aspects. 1 is infrastructure. 2 is regulations. 3 is the market awareness. So we do a lot of meetings with the stakeholders to address the challenges related to this 3 aspects. We do a lot of events to raise awareness. We do test drives, get people in the car and try to make them try and see and feel the EV itself. And we publish reports. We have a report that's coming very soon about the landscape and outlook of the electric vehicle infrastructure in the UAE. It should be coming out in September, October. And we publish a lot of surveys to understand the market dynamics, the challenges, where are the opportunities, etc. It's mainly advocacy activities and all what feed into this. The CBC, we have a very good reputation, I'd say. It's a membership organization, by the way, I forgot to mention that. So total CBC, we have over 120 company memberships and work with many different stakeholders, including also international organizations. And that will take me to the Global New Mobility Coalition.
Yeah.
So this is actually an initiative by the World Economic Forum. It started very recently, and it's a very much needed and interesting initiative. So they started this to mainly advocate on a global level on the case connected, autonomous, shared electric transportation. And they focus on 3 regions at the moment. They focus on China, Europe, and the US. Middle East is not part of this in 2020, but we are maybe now member as observing members who are trying to learn what are the best practices, trying to contribute as much as we can, and hopefully by next year we could have GNMC focusing also on our region. And at the same time, we are taking these learnings and trying to apply them and address them to the different stakeholders here in the region. So what GNMC has a lot of members. I think it has more than 200 companies. And they do a lot of, we do a lot of e-dialogues. Now everything is online. So I've been there in the last 2 months. We did I participated in 5 dialogues, bringing the key leaders and the different sectors, because it's a case, it's not only electric, together and discussing the different policies, regulations, the best practices. I think it's a very interesting initiative, and honestly, we've been learning a lot from this. We have an event tomorrow, so if we publish this webcast today, maybe people will be invited to the event. It's actually today, sorry. They have a very interesting event later today. It's called the Inclusivity Quotient, and it's mainly to address the gender equality and the e-mobility sector worldwide. So, and it's open event, open for everyone. Everyone will be invited to this as well. They do a lot of events as well, very interesting on a global level.
They sound like really great initiatives, and I encourage our listeners to check them out. Moving on, I wanted to ask what emerging technologies or developments you're most looking forward to seeing in the e-mobility space over the next 5-10 years, and with particular reference to the UAE.
I think there will be a lot of focus on the software part, like integrating the vehicle with, they call it vehicle to X, integrating the vehicle or connecting the vehicle to everything else.
Yes.
I think starting mainly with when you talk about energy, so connecting the vehicle to the grid, to your home, to your, so you can, it becomes a very, so all it is one package. You can control everything through your phone, including your home energy consumption, your car energy consumption. Everything is connected on one phone. And the potential of this is actually tremendous. If you look at what are the benefits you'll get out of this eventually, if you have V2G as commercially available, you can use the car as a battery in case you need to use electricity to the grid, supply electricity to the grid. And there's also so much benefits, so many benefits you can get out of this from also infrastructure point of view. So right now, there's a very interesting story about there's a district in Berlin called the Dentist District. So it's a very rich district, and all of the people there, they own electric vehicles. So what happens is they used to, all of them come out of work at the same time, so they connect the EV to the grid, and immediately the grid can't actually accommodate that much load. So and back then, because I think this was almost 4 years ago, and smart charging and load management wasn't really that popular. So without smart charging and load management, you can imagine how much you are hurting the grid. And now with the technology and smart charging, load management, this is not an issue anymore. You can control how much electricity you are giving to each vehicle. You can even vary the voltage you are giving to each vehicle. So it's not an issue anymore. So in terms of the infrastructure, in the past, you would have to change your whole infrastructure to accommodate that many vehicles. But now, especially if you have a fleet for companies, etc., with this technology, it's not an issue anymore, and this would make things much easier for EV adoption with these technologies. Also, Dubai as a city that's always focusing on, I think the UAE in general as well, always focusing on the new technologies and the future technologies. There's a lot of focus also on V2G, investing in startups, and also from the government point of view. I think there will be very soon some regulations to focusing on this and how to accelerate the adoption of these future technologies. I think autonomous and the other aspects of future mobility in this part of the world, although Dubai is actually very advanced in autonomous already, Dubai is one of the few cities that are already HD mapped, so it's autonomous ready. You can actually if you have a car that's ready to go autonomous on the road, Dubai is already ready from infrastructure point of view to actually implement the technology. But I think the maturity of the whole market is a little bit not mature yet. And you can see that already once the pandemic started, most of the big companies already freezed their autonomous investments because it's not the one that would give them the fastest return on investment. So I don't think autonomous will come very soon, especially in this region. The integration between shared and electric is actually a very interesting one as well. I don't know if you know that, but this region is actually very car dependent, especially the UAE, Saudi. So even the whole country is actually built based on the fact that everyone will have his own car. Only recently, when Dubai had this vision to have more people using public transportation, they built a very advanced metro lines. And that was a tipping point when some people actually started to use public transportation, but mostly people are using their own cars. So that's why the integration between shared and electric and the availability of the different shared mobility models, I think will have a lot of potential in the future. As we have started to see that now, there are a few companies in the UAE providing vehicles on shared model. There are even some models of having electric vehicles shared for gated communities. So there's a city in Dubai called Sustainable City. I don't know if you heard about it.
Yes, I have, yeah.
Yeah, and they have recently launched a program to it's like providing Bolt. It's a partnership with GM, so they are providing Chevrolet Bolt for the residents on a sharing model. I think we'll see a lot of this different interesting models in the future.
Amazing. So I wanted to finalize the episode with asking about anything you'd like to plug or promote before we finish.
Yeah, I think one last point I want to mention is maybe the mobility culture of this region.
Okay.
So as I mentioned, it's a region that's based on owning a vehicle, and with the pandemic, some people who used to use public transportation might start to buying their own vehicles as well, and so the challenge might have increased. We're actually working now on a study, a comparative study comparing Dubai. We took Dubai as a case study with a few other cities worldwide, including Boston, London, and Berlin, to understand the differences and start looking at what are the best practices to change this. So there was a study that was done by MIT Energy Initiative almost 4 months ago, looking at they have something called car pride score. So it's basically how people judge each other based on which car they drive and which model they even drive. And not surprisingly, UAE came in the second place worldwide in terms of the car pride. So this is something, again, I think the government also is looking at in a serious way. And I think once you flip this, you'll find so much differences. Or once it will not be flipped like over the day, but I think there's so much effort that needs to be done on this. And I think this is the main point that needs a lot of attention from investment, from awareness, from all aspects. Because there's already a lot of awareness about sustainability in the region, which is surprising as well for some people from outside the region. It just the whole culture is if you don't have a car, it would be very strange. Like if you come to a meeting and someone asks you how did you come, and you say it by a metro or by a taxi, it's not really something that people used to it. So yeah, I think we need to spend a lot of effort to raise awareness from all levels, individuals, society, community organizations, and the government to change this culture of owning a vehicle and car pride, etc.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's my last point I want to end with.
I think that's a really great place to finish. Thank you, Ahmed.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure speaking to you.
Another pleasant conversation, and it was great to welcome Ahmed to discuss mobility culture in the Middle East, the UAE's recent surge in EV adoption, and Egypt's potential as an EV hub in the future. We'll be back for another episode soon.